The night was quiet, and Officer Emily was finishing her patrol when she felt a presence behind her. She turned, and there stood a frail German Shepherd puppy, its eyes filled with desperation. At first, she thought it was lost, but then the puppy turned and begged her to follow. Something was wrong. With every step, the puppy led her deeper into the unknown, until they reached a dark, abandoned shed. What she found inside shattered her heart. Stay with Creature Clips as we uncover a story of loyalty, heartbreak, and hope that will leave you in tears. Welcome to Creature Clips, where we share unbelievable and touching stories about animals and their incredible connections with humans. Today's story is about one tiny German Shepherd puppy who refused to give up, a puppy who fought against all odds to find help. And when Officer Emily finally realized the truth, she could not hold back her tears. Stay with us until the end, because this story will touch your heart. The night air was crisp, and the city streets were nearly empty. Officer Emily had been patrolling for hours, her boots echoing softly against the pavement as she moved through familiar routes. The glow of the streetlights cast long shadows, and the distant hum of traffic was the only sound breaking the silence. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, but something felt different. She could not quite put her finger on it, but a strange sense of unease settled over her. As she continued walking, a soft noise reached her ears. The faint sound of footsteps. Emily stopped in her tracks, listening carefully. The steps halted as well. Slowly, she turned around. There, in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, stood a tiny German Shepherd puppy. It was frail and trembling, its small body barely holding itself up. Dirt clung to its matted fur, and its ribs were faintly visible beneath the thin layer of skin. The puppy's tail was tucked between its legs, its ears slightly lowered, and its big brown eyes locked onto Emily's. Not with fear, but with something else. Desperation. Emily crouched down, her voice soft and reassuring. "Hey there, little one. Are you lost?" The puppy did not move. It did not wag its tail. It did not whimper. It simply stood there, staring at her, its tiny chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Then, without warning, the puppy took a step back. Emily frowned, extending her hand slightly, hoping to ease its fear. But instead of approaching, the puppy turned and ran a few steps ahead. Then it stopped. It glanced back at her, eyes pleading. It was waiting for her. Emily's heartbeat quickened. This was not normal behavior for a lost puppy. Strays were either too scared to approach or too hungry to resist food. But this one, it wanted something else. Her instincts told her to follow. "All right, little one, show me where you want to go," she murmured. The puppy hesitated for a brief moment before turning and continuing forward, its tiny legs moving as fast as they could. Emily followed. The streets were eerily silent as she trailed behind the small creature. It moved with purpose, darting around corners, pausing just enough to make sure she was still behind it. It was leading her somewhere. The further they went, the more uneasy Emily felt. The puppy was not wandering aimlessly. It knew exactly where it was going. After what felt like 10 minutes of walking, they reached the edge of town. The bright city lights had faded into darkness, replaced by an area Emily rarely patrolled, a place filled with abandoned buildings, forgotten streets, and silence so thick it was unsettling. The puppy made a sharp turn, heading straight toward a broken-down wooden shed. Emily slowed her pace. The structure looked unstable, its roof sagging, its walls barely holding together. Weeds had overgrown the entrance, and the air carried a damp, musty scent. The puppy stopped at the door. It turned to look at her, eyes filled with urgency. Emily hesitated. Then she reached for the flashlight attached to her belt, clicked it on, and cautiously stepped forward. The moment she entered, a chill ran down her spine. The air inside was stale and heavy, carrying a faint metallic scent that made her uneasy. The dim beam of her flashlight swept across the dusty floor, revealing old wooden planks, scattered debris, and she froze. In the farthest corner of the shed, barely visible in the weak moonlight, lay a motionless body. Emily's breath caught in her throat. It was another German Shepherd, a fully grown one. The adult dog was curled up against the wall, its fur caked in dirt, its body unnaturally still. The puppy rushed forward and pressed itself against the larger dog's side, letting out a soft, heartbreaking whimper. Emily stepped closer, her pulse pounding. She knelt beside the lifeless figure and carefully reached out, placing her fingers near its nose. No movement, no breath. Her throat tightened. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The dog was gone. She exhaled sharply, grief washing over her. Emily had seen many things in her years as an officer. She had responded to distress calls, saved lives, and even witnessed tragedy. But this was different. This was pure, raw heartbreak. The puppy nestled closer to its mother's body, letting out another helpless whimper. It nudged her gently, as if trying to wake her up. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. The mother dog had likely passed away days ago. And yet, this tiny, helpless puppy had refused to leave her side. Even in death it had stayed, hoping, praying that someone would come. And when no one did, it had gone out searching for help. Emily could not hold back her emotions anymore. A tear slipped down her cheek. She reached out and gently ran her fingers through the mother dog's fur. It was rough and cold. "I am so sorry, girl," she whispered. The puppy's ears twitched at her voice. Slowly, it turned its gaze toward Emily. For the first time, she saw it up close. Its eyes were dull with exhaustion, yet behind them was something even stronger than sorrow. Hope. A silent, desperate hope that someone would save it. Emily wiped her tears. She could not leave this puppy here. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and scooped the tiny creature into her arms. It was lighter than she expected, its small body fragile in her grasp. The puppy stiffened for a moment, but then slowly melted into her touch. As if, finally, after all this time, it felt safe. Emily held it close, whispering, "You are coming with me." The puppy did not resist. It simply laid its head against her chest, too tired to do anything else. Emily took one last look at the mother dog before standing up. She would make sure the mother received a proper farewell. But right now, she had to focus on the living. She turned and stepped out of the shed, cradling the puppy in her arms. For the first time since the night began, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever. She had found the puppy, but in many ways, the puppy had found her too. The moment Emily stepped inside, a wave of unease washed over her. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and something else, something metallic and unsettling. The weak beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating dust swirling in the stale air. Her breath hitched. Against the far wall, half hidden in the shadows, lay a lifeless figure. An adult German Shepherd, motionless, its once proud body now still and fragile. The puppy darted forward, whimpering softly as it nuzzled against the larger dog's side. It nudged her, pressed its tiny paws against her, begging for a response. But there was none. Emily's heart clenched. She crouched beside the mother dog, reaching out hesitantly. Her fingers brushed against its fur, cold, stiff, lifeless. A deep ache settled in her chest. This was why the puppy had sought her out. This was the plea it had been silently screaming the whole time. It had not been lost. It had been searching for someone to help its mother. Emily swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She had seen her fair share of heartbreak on the job, but something about this moment felt different, more personal, more devastating. The puppy whined, nudging its mother again. It still did not understand. It still had hope. Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes as she watched the small, fragile creature fight against the reality before it. How long had it been waiting? How long had it sat here, alone in this abandoned place, refusing to leave? How long had it believed that if it just tried a little harder, waited a little longer, cried a little louder, its mother would wake up? Emily felt her hands tremble. She reached out, gently lifting the puppy into her arms. It tensed at first, as if reluctant to leave. But then, slowly, cautiously, it curled into her chest. It was exhausted. It was defeated. Emily held it close, whispering, "I am so sorry, little one." The puppy let out a tiny broken sigh, finally letting go. Emily took one last look at the mother dog. She could not save her, but she could save her baby. She stood up, stepping back into the night, cradling the puppy in her arms. For the first time, the weight of the moment settled deep into her soul. This puppy had not just found her tonight. It had chosen her. Emily's heart shattered as she knelt beside the motionless body of the adult dog. The lifeless form of the German Shepherd lay in the corner of the shed, its fur matted and dirty, its once vibrant eyes now closed forever. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, brushing against the cold body. No breath, no movement. It was as if all life had been drained from the poor creature. Tears pooled in Emily's eyes as the weight of the situation sank in. She had hoped, deep down, that the dog might still be alive, perhaps barely clinging to life, needing a little time and help to recover. But there was no hope. This dog was gone. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her emotions. The puppy's soft whimpers broke through her thoughts, reminding her of the pain this little one had endured. She turned to see the puppy, now sitting beside its mother's body, staring up at her with those big, innocent eyes. It was as if it was trying to tell her that it had done everything it could. It had followed strangers, sought out help, chased after anyone who might listen, and finally found Emily. But it was too late. The puppy had fought so hard to save its mother. It had stayed by her side, never giving up, hoping that someone would come to their aid. And yet, despite all the effort, it had been too late to stop the inevitable. The realization hit Emily hard. This puppy wasn't just lost. It was a survivor. It had survived alone for so long. It had wandered through streets, seeking help, hoping against hope that someone would step in and save them. But there had been no one, until Emily. The tears that had been gathering in her eyes began to fall, slowly, one by one. She had seen animals suffer, and she had witnessed death countless times. But this was different. This was pure loss. The puppy had done everything it could to save its mother. It had not given up, even when the world around it seemed to be falling apart. Emily swallowed hard. She kneeled beside the puppy, her heart aching. The small creature sniffed at its mother's body, letting out a tiny, pitiful whine. It was as though it was still hoping, still waiting for some sign, for some miracle. But there would be no miracle. The puppy's mother was gone. And now it was Emily's responsibility to ensure that the little one found its new beginning. Taking a deep breath, Emily gently scooped the puppy into her arms again. It nestled into her chest, exhausted but still alive, still holding on to the hope that it had once lost. She could not bring the mother back, but she could save the puppy from the same fate. She would not let it suffer any longer. Emily whispered softly, "I've got you. You're not alone anymore." As she stood and began to walk out of the shed, the full gravity of the situation hit her. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a second chance. For the puppy, for herself, and for all the love and hope they still had to give each other. The shed behind her stood silent, the last remains of a lost soul left behind. But with each step she took, Emily felt the bond between her and the tiny, fragile puppy grow stronger. They were no longer strangers. They were family. And this was just the beginning. A lump formed in Emily's throat as she knelt beside the lifeless body of the mother dog. She had seen many things in her years as a police officer, crimes, accidents, and tragedies. But nothing had hit her like this. The sight of this tiny, fragile puppy desperately trying to save its mother, only to find death instead of salvation, tore at her heart in a way she hadn't anticipated. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing against the cold fur of the mother. The soft fur was no comfort now, but it was all she had. "I am so sorry, girl," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. The puppy, still nestled against its mother's body, pressed itself closer, as if trying to hold on to the last trace of its mother's warmth. It whimpered softly, its tiny body trembling with a sadness that could not be explained by words alone. Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek. This wasn't just a dog. This was a mother, a protector, a companion. And now, she was gone. And the little one, the one that had fought so hard, was left to face the world alone. Emily wiped at her eyes, but it did little to stop the flood of emotions that overwhelmed her. She had dealt with loss before, but this felt different. This was pure heartbreak. She had no way of knowing how long the mother had been gone. How long had this puppy been alone, hoping someone would come? How many nights had it spent alone, trying to comfort the lifeless body of its mother, unaware that no one could help? One thing was clear. This puppy had never given up. Even when everything seemed hopeless, even when its world was falling apart, the puppy had fought. It had followed strangers, hoping to find help. It had trusted, despite the cruelty it had faced. Emily's heart ached for the little one. It had been so brave, so strong, yet so vulnerable. She wiped away another tear, this time with a sense of determination. She couldn't let this puppy suffer any longer. With gentle hands, she scooped the small creature into her arms once again. The puppy lifted its head, looking into her eyes with an understanding that surprised Emily. There was no fear in the puppy's gaze, just a quiet acceptance, as if it knew that things would be different now. Emily spoke softly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You are coming with me." The puppy seemed to nod, its tiny tail wagging just slightly. It was time. Time for a new beginning. Time for a second chance. Emily stood up, holding the puppy close, and took one last glance at the mother's body. She would make sure that the mother received the respect and dignity she deserved. But right now, her focus was on the puppy, on giving it a chance to heal, to grow, to live. She walked out of the shed, the weight of the world still heavy on her shoulders, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The tiny creature in her arms was now her responsibility, and Emily vowed to do whatever it took to make sure the puppy never felt abandoned again. It was time for them both to move forward. As Emily drove back to her patrol car, the tiny puppy nestled comfortably in her arms, she couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. The puppy was so fragile, so vulnerable, but there was a spark in its eyes that reminded Emily of the resilience she had witnessed earlier. This little one wasn't just a survivor, it was a fighter. She knew she had to do everything in her power to help it heal. Without wasting another moment, she started the engine and drove straight to the nearest veterinary clinic. The drive felt longer than usual, the tension in her chest tightening with every passing minute. When they finally arrived, Emily rushed inside with the puppy in her arms, the tiny creature now shivering slightly despite the warmth of the car. The vet was quick to assess the situation, confirming what Emily had feared. The puppy was malnourished, dehydrated, and far weaker than it should have been for its age. But the vet was hopeful. With care, the puppy would recover. The thought brought Emily a small sense of relief, but it didn't erase the pain she felt seeing the condition the little one was in. "Don't worry," the vet reassured her. "We'll make sure she gets the treatment she needs." The night passed slowly, but Emily stayed by the puppy's side, offering comfort and quiet encouragement. She couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't just another case, it was personal. The following weeks were a whirlwind of doctor visits, medications, and long nights spent comforting the puppy as it recovered. The puppy, once so frail and unsure, began to change. Slowly, she started to show more energy, more life. Her tiny tail that had once hung limply at her side began to wag, first a little, then more confidently as the days went by. She began to explore, slowly at first, then with more curiosity and enthusiasm. Every day, the little creature grew stronger, her spirit brighter, and most importantly, she began to trust again. The puppy, once so hesitant and frightened, began to realize that she was safe, that she was loved. Emily made sure of it. She showered the puppy with affection, comfort, and patience. There was no rushing her recovery. Emily knew that trust needed time to rebuild, and that trust, day by day, began to grow. It didn't take long for Emily to realize that she could never let this little soul go. The bond they had formed over the past few weeks was unbreakable. In that moment, she made a decision. She was going to adopt the puppy. She would give her a home, a family, and most of all, love. As the weeks turned into months, the puppy continued to thrive. She was no longer the timid, weak creature that had once wandered the streets searching for help. She was strong, playful, and full of joy. Emily named her Hope, because that was what she was. A reminder of the resilience of the spirit, of the power of love, and second chances. Hope had been through so much, yet she had refused to give up. Even when the world seemed dark and unforgiving, she had kept fighting. And in the end, she had found a new life, one filled with comfort, security, and a home filled with love. Hope's story was a reminder to Emily, and to everyone, that even in the saddest of moments, there is always hope. Through the darkest of nights, through the deepest of struggles, there is always a chance for a new beginning. And for Emily and Hope, that beginning was just the start of a beautiful journey together. Officer Emily never expected that one tiny puppy would change her life forever. She thought she was rescuing Hope, but in reality, Hope rescued her too. This story serves as a beautiful reminder of the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, their unwavering loyalty, their endless love, and their quiet, powerful ways of teaching us what truly matters. Until next time, take care. And always remember, sometimes the ones we save end up saving us. Thank you for watching.